in this pursuit of God, we live out a life of devotion. And it's interesting because sometimes we think of devotion purely in a spiritual sense. But when we look at our life, we show devotion to many different things. How do we show devotion to a person? A best friend, a spouse, a loved one? Well, we spend time with that person. We engage in conversation. We devote part of our time and our life to them. Maybe we devote part of our income in the purchasing of gifts and doing things together with them. Devotion, to be devoted to something, means that we spend some time with them. That the things that they care about, we find ourselves caring about. We see that in our life that as we are devoted to something, our life begins to revolve around that person, that individual, that opportunity, that thing that we are being devoted to. And if we want to grow as believers, we must be devoted to the things of God. So how do we show devotion to God? Well, we spend time with Him. Part of that is in corporate worship. So making attendance either on Sunday morning here at the building or worshiping together with us online. That we make regular weekly worship a priority. We spend, not just in corporate things, but we spend individual time with God. How many times during the week do we open up Scripture? Do we read God's words of life to us? Do we take in His direction and His guidance and His wisdom about how to deal with the life that we're living? There are many things in Scripture that seem like it's an ancient text, like it's written for someone else in some other place, but the wisdom we can garnish, the wisdom we can gather from those other areas or the other places, those other opportunities in history, we can use those where we are to avoid the mistakes of some people from the past. As we begin to walk with God, as we begin as we spend time with Him in His Word, we begin to gather His mind and His mindset, His vision, His eyes, His thoughts, His heart for the world around us. So how do we live out our life? And we go to Scripture and we find out what God desires from us. We spend time with Him. We give Him gifts. Sometimes it's in the form of financial contributions to the work of His church, the work of the ministry. And so maybe we need to set aside part of our budget so that we can give faithfully and regularly to the work of God in this place and around the world. Maybe it's giving of ourselves in the time and talents that He's blessed us with. We've all been given abilities. We've all been given gifts to use for the furthering of the ministry of the church and for the furthering of God's people. And as we serve one another, we have our hearts shaped a little bit more into the heart of God. We show our devotion to Him by serving Him, by loving those around us well. And by our actions, they get to see the life of God in us. And maybe through that, we have the opportunity to share with them about who He is. And that's another thing about a life of devotion. Those who you love, those who you care for, don't you talk about with them to others? You should see the thing that my wife did, that my husband did this thing for me, my children, this dear friend of mine. As we brag about our loved ones to others, we are showing devotion. We brag about God to those around us. As we love others well, as we share with others, we are showing that we live a life of devotion to God. So what is our life saying? Does our life say that we walk in step with Him? Does our life say that we pursue Him? Is our life a life of devotion to our great God? I hope so. I hope that you will walk with me in this, and that you will pursue God in this, and that together we might point all men and women to know Him. I love you guys. I'm praying for you, and I hope we get to see you real soon.